Hello, little children. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go through this big writing. Now, as you can see, the title is Haunted House Setting Description. Now, our plan this week is to do a description of a haunted house, and next week to do a description of, for most of you anyway, it will be a school. Some of you have chosen to go a slightly different direction with your stories, so you'll have to choose your own setting and you'll have to adapt as we go. Now, the reason why we're going to describe a haunted house is because we want to use lots of techniques. But actually, believe it or not, describing a haunted house is quite easy. And describing a school, even although you've been in a school a lot more than you've been in a haunted house, unless of course you live in a haunted house, actually describing a haunted house is a lot easier, because you could almost say a haunted house is a kind of a stereotype, and therefore there are certain words that are useful to use, whereas a school, you can make a school any way you want. You can make it a haunted school, you can make it a happy school, you can make it a scary school. So a haunted house is basically all haunted houses are more or less the same, but schools can be very different. So we're going to take, this week we're going to go with the haunted house, and we're going to adapt our technique for next week's description of a school. And then the following week you'll actually write your story based on the characters that you've already chosen, the setting that you've already created, and you can make up your plot. Okay. So you're going to use your five senses. This is a technique that we've used a lot in school. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you taste? What can you smell? Even what can you touch? And then what are your feelings inside about those things? Because we all have feelings about buildings, believe it or not. And there'll be very particular feelings about haunted houses. You can see that there are two pictures at the top of the page here, very different from haunted houses, and I'm certain that they would give you, that you would feel something about them that would be different from how you feel about a haunted house. Descriptions of the scene help us to build up a picture. The author can use landscapes and different types of buildings to help us visualise. And we've got pictures of landscapes here, although one of them is under the sea. And in one of the landscapes, we can see on the left-hand side, there's a building, a castle. Using colour, light and dark. Now this takes us back to when we were filming. Using colour, light and dark. Colours can reflect the character's emotions. We know this from Up. Bright colours suggest happiness or safety. Dark colours suggest sadness or danger. So when you're writing today, you'll be mostly using dark colours, but next week when you're writing about your school, you might want to think about different colours that you see yourselves within school buildings. So before writing, we need to understand the learning intention and the success criteria. We need to understand the purpose of our writing. We need to look at models of writing. We need to look at the author's craft, highlight key features of language and structure, discuss ideas and plan, and also visualise. Okay, so these are the things that we'll do on Thursday, and then on Friday we'll do our actual writing. So now the list here, I don't know whether or not you'll have a whiteboard or a whiteboard pen at home. Excuse me. Or highlighters, but you most certainly have a pencil, so if nothing else you can use that. So our learning outcome is to write an expressive and detailed description of a haunted house setting using our five senses. And our success criteria: give detailed information of where and when the description is set. Now, when can mean, is it set modern day? Is it set 100 years ago? Is it set in the morning? Is it set in the afternoon? Is it set at night? Use all of my senses to describe the setting. Use colour. Use description of colour, light and dark. Use different adjectives, adverbs, and descriptive phrases effectively to help readers visualise the scene. Use techniques such as similes, metaphors, and onomatopoeia to aid description. And then something that you might not think about is using the weather to good effect. And this can be especially helpful in a haunted house. I'm sure that thoughts of weather bring a certain kind of weather, because there is a certain kind of weather that is associated with a haunted house. And that is really storms, lightning, high wind, that kind of thing. So, start with a thesaurus challenge. A thesaurus is a wee bit like a dictionary, but it doesn't tell you what words mean. It just tells you a word that has the same meaning. So what I'm looking for you to do is to find 3 different words that mean the same as scary, dark, and mysterious. Now, these are words that are useful for not only this week, but I would keep them because depending on what kind of school you're going to write about next week, you might actually want to mention these same words. Now, we're going to up-level this sentence. The house on the hill was spooky. It's not a great sentence. So, adjectives that can describe house, another word for hill, and something more descriptive than spooky. And I would really like to see your sentences. If you can think of more than one, fantastic. So let's look at openers. Make a list of interesting openers. Okay, that is just to help you. Openers is something that this year we haven't been great with. We've had fantastic vocabulary. I've seen a huge improvement in punctuation. I cannot tell you the improvement from the beginning of P6 to now. What a fantastic improvement you made. But openers is maybe an area that is mostly down to me, because it's not an area that I have emphasised because I was more concerned with your punctuation. So now is a time to be thinking about openers, thinking about how we might start a sentence. Okay? And whatever you're reading just now, why don't you have a look through and see what kind of openers are being used there. Now we're going to read the start of a haunted house setting and examine the techniques used. Again, you can look here for openers. In fact, it says to you, read through the extract and look for examples of ambitious vocabulary, different senses being used, metaphors, similes, personification, onomatopoeia, and interesting openers. Personification, this is a really good time to use personification because you can use personification to describe trees, doors, windows, furniture, because in a haunted house, if you see a tree that's doing something that you wouldn't expect a tree to be doing and it's kind of human-like, that's scary. A door, some furniture, these are the things that are scary, and they can be emphasised particularly when you're writing about a haunted house. Okay, so let's look through, and you might want to print this off to do some highlighting. It's just these 2 pages. I'm not suggesting that you print the whole document off, but just the 2 pages of description. Slowly the sky became darker, the moon giving off a dim, misty glow. I should have headed back home a long time ago. My heart was pounding in my chest as I swiftly darted through the overgrown bushes, the jagged leaves brushing against my cold hands and making me tremble. All of a sudden, in the distance, a small house became visible. The warm light flickered gently in the window. I felt relieved to see the house, so I started to scramble up the muddy slope. The mud was squelching between my fingers, and the cold wind nipped at my eyes, making them water uncontrollably. Eventually, I reached the top of the hill. An owl hooted in the distance, making me jump. Desperately, I ran towards the old wooden door of the house. The door was already open. It squeaked as I gently pushed it with my cold red fingers. The smell of the burning fire inside stung my nostrils and made me cough. As I crept through the dark hallway, I was startled by the old dusty pictures hanging on the walls. It looked as though the eyes were following me. Suddenly, a loud clatter came from behind me. I turned around sharply. My breaths were getting quicker and my hands began to shake. Then, from out of the corner of my eye, I could just make out a silhouette standing in the entrance to the living room. Who or what was it? Okay, so there's a lot there in terms of ambitious vocabulary, using senses, metaphor, similes, personification, onomatopoeia, and interesting openers. They're all there, so take your pick to help you when you're doing your writing. What might we see? Think about the time of day. Is it dark or light inside the house? What type of weather is it? Cold, rainy, frosty, foggy? These will affect your description of this setting. Think about the house, what the house looks like inside as you wander around it. What is it like walking through the house? Is it a long, winding hallway or an old staircase? What sounds might we hear? Close your eyes and imagining you're entering the haunted house on the hill. What sounds can you hear as you walk through the door? What can you hear as you walk through the dark hallway? The floorboards are old. When you walk through the house, what sounds do they make? What can we smell? Now imagine what weird, wonderful smells you might smell once you've entered the house. Think of the smells that might be in the air as you creep around. These pictures are quite helpful. What might we feel or touch? There was mentioning of touching outside the house, but in the extract. But what about inside the house? Can you think of some interesting things that you might be able to feel as you walk through the haunted house? How do they feel? Rough, smooth, wet, cold? It could be an object that you can touch or an emotion that you're feeling. Scared, terrified, trembling, shivering, nervous, anxious. And what might you be able to taste? Okay, next we're going to look at planning, and this basically will be the last thing that we need to do today, and everything after this is for tomorrow for writing. So you're going to do another mind map, and if you write haunted house in the middle and then your 5 senses, what can you see, what can you hear, what can you touch, what can you taste, what can you smell? And touch includes your feelings, your emotions. Okay, so once you have done that, you have completed the task for today and you can actually do your writing tomorrow. So while you're writing, understand the learning intention and assess criteria. Visualise, use your planning grid and your mind map. Look back at the model text, look back at your mind map. Look at word banks or other tools. Check your technical targets. Stop and check that your writing makes sense. And remember who your audience is. That doesn't mean like for saying it out loud. It just means when you're writing, who you're writing the story for. That's helpful to have somebody in mind. So now you're going to write a description of a haunted house using all your senses. Remember to include your feelings. Try to visualise your setting. Use the mind map. I can give detailed information of where and when the description is set. Use all of my senses. Use description of colour, light and dark. Use different adjectives, adverbs and descriptive phrases to effectively help readers visualise the scene. Use techniques such as similes, metaphors, onomatopoeia to aid your description, and describe the weather to good effect. Once you have finished or made a decent start, read over your work. Have you been using your planning? Have you met your technical targets? Does your writing make sense? Is your writing meeting the success criteria? Do you need to look back at the model text? You also might want to get somebody in the house to check over. So after you've finished, check to see if you've achieved all the success criteria. Check your technical targets. And then let me see what you've done. Read over your own writing carefully. Mark your work against the criteria. How well did you do? Have you got any next steps? Okay, and I look forward to reading these.